see. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. Thank you, God. When all I see is the cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I find on my knees, with my hands lifted high, oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And Almighty fortress, you go before us, and nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. So when I fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing to the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Ever since Johnny was 3 years old, he loved aeroplanes. When his birthday came along, his parents knew what they'd have to get him. It would be a model aeroplane. When he grew up in life, all he could watch on the TV were documentaries and films about aeroplanes, how they were built, fighter planes, how they were put together. He was obsessed with aeroplanes and how they flew through the sky, how they had been developed over the years to become faster and faster and faster. And as Johnny grew up, he went to every plane show that he could go to, every aircraft that he could fly on, he took off in. Every event that he could be at, every information that he could get about an aeroplane, he absorbed into his life like he was like a sponge soaking up water. When he eventually came to leave school, Johnny knew what job he wanted to do. He wanted to work on aircrafts. He got a job, he got an apprenticeship at a local firm, and before long, he was there making the aircrafts. And not just that, but Johnny even married a young girl who also shared his enthusiasm about planes. He thought it was brilliant, the fact that he got to work alongside these planes, and he got to work so close to the runway that as they landed, he could feel the breeze of the air going past his face. As they took off into the sky, he felt the propulsion of the engines forcing them up into the air. That's all he could want to live for, was the aeroplanes. After a few years of working at the airport, Johnny's friends came along and they said, "Johnny, you are obsessed with these Johnny aeroplanes. Haven't you got anything else that you want to do with your life?" His mum and dad said to him, "Johnny, aeroplanes are great, we know you love them, but do you want to still stay with them when now you're older?" And as Johnny went back to work one day, he began to get a little bit disheartened. An aeroplane came into the warehouse and it needed repair. The pilot came down from the plane and he got a little bit discouraged because the pilot told Johnny everything that wasn't working properly with his aeroplane. Day after day he had to start fixing these aeroplanes because things were starting to go wrong with them. Johnny turned to his boss after years and years of working in the firm, saying, "I think I've had enough of aeroplanes. It's
time to move on with my life. And Johnny moved on and he got himself a job in a Korean, some other industry. Years later, Johnny came back to his boss who worked at the airport, and his boss said to him this. He said, "Johnny, why did you give up? You had such a passion, you had such an enthusiasm for planes. Why did you walk away?" He said, "I just lost my enthusiasm for what I once loved." Johnny's ex-boss turned to him and said, "Johnny, I was months away from offering you the opportunity to become a pilot yourself. You could have flown the planes in the sky." And Johnny went away heartbroken from that conversation. In Romans chapter 12, verse 11, it says this: "Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serve the Lord." I want to talk to you this morning about this. Staying in the skies. Staying in the skies with your faith in Jesus. You will go through life and there will be times that come along where it seems like your enthusiasm for God and for church and for Christianity just wanes. Seems maybe that you've been there months on months, year on year, and once you were soaring in the skies with your faith, and once you believed God for so much, but when the storms of life came, it's as if you lost your enthusiasm for God, and you lost your zeal, and you lost your passion, and you lost your belief, and it's as if God left you, and you left the skies, and you're no longer in the skies, but you're on the ground. You've been grounded, just like those aeroplanes that needed fixing. You see, staying passionate is a skill that we all have to learn. Staying passionate in our walk with Jesus, staying full of zeal, staying full of fervour for our walk with God is not something that comes naturally. The earth, the world, the enemy will drag out of you every ounce of life, every ounce of passion, every ounce of zeal, unless we're careful. And our Christian walk can just become dry and boring and routine and monotonous. But I want to say this morning, stay in the skies. Stay in the skies of your faith. Stay believing God for great things for you and your family. Stay believing God that He can change situations in your life. Stay believing God that the impossible can become the impossible. This word that we just came across on that verse, it says, stay fervent. Fervent. What is it? It says this in verse 11. Keep your spiritual fervour. Now the Latin word for fervour is actually fervens, which actually means to boil. To boil. Paul was saying, listen, in your faith, be boiling. In your faith, don't allow yourself to be lukewarm. In your faith, don't allow yourself to settle for mediocrity, but rise up to boiling point. I don't like a cup of tea. If we have tea in a house or coffee, and it's lukewarm, and I think, what's the point? I want something that's really hot. Gemma tells me off because I like my food really warm, burning in my mouth. I don't know why, but I like it really hot, really warm. And if it's not warm enough, what happens? I might have to go back in the microwave. Oh, I'm dodging that ground now, aren't I? But I like it really warm, really hot, really hot. And it's the same with our faith, folks. Jesus says, don't stay lukewarm, stay hot. Let me give you three people from the Old Testament that just lost enthusiasm. Three people that once their faith might have been bright and things might have been going well, but they lost their enthusiasm for God and for the things of His kingdom. The first person is from 2 Kings, chapter 13, verse 8. The story goes of the king of Israel. His name was Jehoash. Jehoash was the king, and he wasn't a terrible king, he wasn't a great king either, but here we go. He realized that he was under attack. His nation was under attack. The children of Israel were under attack. And Jehoash goes and does a good thing when he's in trouble. He goes to the man of God, the prophet Elisha, and he says, look, the Arameans, they're coming. They're under attack. Not a bad thing to go to a man of God when you're in trouble, is it? You can go to so many different people, folks. You can seek advice from hundreds of different people. But Jehoash didn't know where to go, and he went to Elisha. He went to Elisha the prophet. And Elisha did something strange. He said to Jehoash, he said, take up the bow and the arrows. Take them up in your hand. And Elisha put his arms around Jehoash. And he said, fire the arrow out of the window. And Jehoash fired it. And it went out. And Elijah came back to him and said, well done, you will defeat the Arameans. Elisha then gives him another instruction. It's an instruction to strike the ground. And Jehoash takes up his arrow and he strikes the ground 3 times. 3 times. And Elisha looks at him and says these words. Let me get it for you. He says this, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have completely destroyed it. But now you will only defeat it 3 times. For whatever reason, we don't know, but Jehoash, rather than being enthusiastic about defeating the enemies of God, got lackluster. He lacked enthusiasm. He lacked a bit of energy. He lacked something within his being to go bang, bang, and keep on going bang, bang, bang against the ground. And Elisha says, because you didn't have the enthusiasm when things were tough, because you didn't act with vigor, because you didn't act with enthusiasm, you'll only defeat your enemy 3 times. When you could have defeated them completely. And I wonder in our lives, folks, how quickly we give up on praying for things. I wonder in our lives how quickly we give up on circumstances that need changing. I wonder how many times we've given up on praying for someone that we've longed to come to God. I wonder how many times we've given up serving in church. And God would say, if you only kept on, if you only stayed enthusiastic, if you only stayed full of zeal, full of vigor, full of fervor, then you could have completely destroyed the enemy in your life and in your family's life. But we give up too soon. The victory for Jehoash could have been so much greater. The victory for the Israelites could have been so much more. But because of lack of enthusiasm, they lost out the fight. And generations to come had to fight and pick up the battle again. But they lost enthusiasm. Folks, we need a church that's going to keep on. We need a church that's full of zeal. We need a church that's full of fervor for the things of God. When things would come against us and we would just walk away, folks, we need to stay strong. We need to stay planted. We need to stay believing. We need to stay full of energy and full of hope in these days, because we know it's so easy to walk away. We can list off, folks, maybe friends, maybe family, and just think, at one point, they were going so strong for God, but for whatever reason, they lost enthusiasm. I remember as a young person, sitting down with someone, and they wrote at a summer camp, and they wrote amazing words of a song to God. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And you know what? Within a couple of years, that young person was just nowhere to be seen. Enthusiasm just waned away. Zeal for the Lord that was once there was just sapped out. There was no more. We need to stay full of zeal. Let me give you another person who just didn't have enough enthusiasm. This was a guy by the name of Esau. Esau in Genesis 25 talks about how Esau was the brother of Jacob, the older brother. And through Isaac, they were given so much promise from God, so much blessing that was going to be yours. There's so much blessing that they couldn't contain it. And the blessing was in the birthright, being passed from one generation to the next. But the Bible says of Esau that he was a hunter. His younger brother wasn't a hunter and rather enjoyed being inside rather than outside. His brother Esau would go off one day and he'd hunt animals. He'd come back in hungry and thirsty for something to eat. And Jacob was there preparing food. That was the difference between the two brothers. And Jacob, you see, being the younger brother, realized the importance of the birthright. Realized the importance of the blessing of God and what that meant. But Esau, he was so hungry, he was so enthusiastic about his hunting and about his eating and the food that he was going to have. He came in one time from a hunting trip, he sat down, and he was so keen just to get back out on the field and hunt animals. that he said to his brother Jacob, make me something to eat. And Jacob says, well, I can make you some soup, some lentil soup, some stew. And Esau said, fine, just make me something. I don't care what it is, just make me something. And Jacob, because he knew that Esau's attention was elsewhere, because he knew that Esau was distracted by the food and he wanted to fill his belly, and he realized the power of the birthright that was at stake, he said, I'll give you the food, but give me your birthright. And the birthright contained all the blessing of God from Abraham and Isaac. And in a moment where Esau was concerned about other things and distracted and enthusiastic about his hunting, he sold his birthright, the blessing of God, to his younger brother Jacob for a bowl of food. For a bowl of food. All because he was concerned about other things. All because he was enthusiastic about hunting and being outside rather than about the blessing of God in his life. And in your life and my life, folks, we can get consumed with so many things. We can get consumed and distracted with this, with that. But God calls us to have our minds fixed on Him. God calls us to keep Him at the forefront of everything that we do. And we've got to be careful, folks, that we don't get distracted by jobs. We don't get distracted by family. We don't get distracted by climbing the rung on the ladder in work. We don't get distracted by everything else that's going on around us in the news. But if we want to stay full of zeal, folks, we've got to keep Jesus at the center of it all. You see, passion and zeal is a bit like electricity. Electricity is full of so much power. It can be channeled in ways that can light up a city. But unless it's channeled in the right way, it can also do great damage. Electricity, if it's released in the wrong places, folks, it can electrocute people, it can kill people. But when it's channeled along proper lines, it can do incredible good. And it's the same for our zeal. It's the same for our passion. It's the same for our fervour. Folks, we can get so worked up about God, wanting to serve Him, but unless we channel it in the right way, unless we serve God, unless we channel it along lines that God gives us, we can be thrown off course and we can end up in a lot of mess. Let me give you one more person who lost their zeal for God from the Old Testament. A lady by the name of Michal. Have I said that right? Michal? In the book of 2 Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 6, David comes home to Jerusalem, and he's brought the Ark of God with him. He's brought the Ark of God that causes so much blessing. It was God's presence. It was a symbol of God's presence with His people in the Old Testament. And the Ark of God comes in, and David, full of excitement and full of fervour and full of zeal for God and God's work, is dancing up behind the Ark of the Covenant. And David is so consumed about his excitement, so consumed with the things of God, that every 6 steps they have to take a break and offer a sacrifice to God. Can you imagine being so consumed with God and so full of energy with God and so full of zeal that every 6 steps you've got to stop? No. No. But that was David. That was the life of David. And he was a man after God's heart. And you see, David's wife was watching on, Michal. And Michal looked down on David, and she looks at him with a bit of embarrassment, thinking, what is my husband doing? Being so liberated by God, being so free in his expression of worship for God. And Michal says this in 2 Samuel chapter 6, says that she despised him in her heart, because of his excitement for God and his zeal and his fervour. And do you know what it says in the next verses? Because she was so critical of David, it says that for the rest of her life she never had children. For the rest of her life, she was critical of God. She was unenthusiastic about the things of God. And she was barren the rest of her life. Folks, we've got the opportunity to be fruitful, and we've got the opportunity to be barren. And we can be with a crowd that is critical. We can be with a crowd that loses energy. We can be with a crowd that, gets depressed about everything that's going on. Oh, there's this problem over here. Oh, I've got that problem. There's that problem over there in that country. Oh, man, the Prime Minister's had another party. Oh man, things that aren't looking good with the economy. Oh man, everyone's against me. No one wants me to be a Christian. Oh, things are difficult at work. Oh, things are difficult in my family. Things are hard at home. Or we can be part of the people that believes that God wants us to be fruitful where we are. We can be part of the people that are full of zeal, are full of fervour for our God and for His cause and for His kingdom in our life. I believe, folks, that in times to come, that the pattern and the password, as we've been looking at the last few weeks, is that we're going to have to be full of fervour. We're going to have to be full of zeal for our God, like we've never been full of zeal before. If we're going to stand up in our families, if we're going to stand up in our workplaces, folks, we can't just be amongst the people who are just about the things of God. We can't be about the people who are just critical. We can't be critical all the time of everything that goes on. But we've got to have a faith that rises up within us and says that our God can turn things around. We've got to have a prayer in our hearts that says our country might be in a bad state, but we can do something about it. Does anyone believe that? Amen. Come on, let's stand to our feet.